Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for March 24th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is hour one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed, we use the blueprint for liberty, the supreme law of the land, the Constitution for the United States of America as our guide. And folks, we reject revolution, unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Dr. Scott Bradley's with me. Welcome back to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you, and a happy new week to everybody. I don't even know where we are in the year. It's blowing by so fast, but it is a new week, and I'm familiar with that, so we'll go with that.
It's March 24th, so January 4th, February, March 4th. That's 2 months. So you got like 2 months and 20 days. What is that, 80 days about? 20 days away from the 100 days. And Congress has virtually done nothing. They've slow-walked everything. They're not backing Trump, and we're in serious trouble, Doctor.
Well, I'm not sure they're not backing Trump. They've given him his continuing resolution, his increased deficit ceiling, a lot more money for Israel. The military has got a new, on the continuing resolution, $6 billion, I think it was, to mess with. Well, where are they not? I know they're not reacting.
All right,
and
so
responding.
let's talk about this. So on one hand, they're backing everything of the deep state side of Trump, which means every other president along the way.
Sure.
But they're not backing anything that you and I would hope they would be backing from Trump. So all the stuff in the mainstream press, the media, they're not backing Trump on. They're slow walking. All the stuff that has to do with the deep state that they don't want to touch. It's kind of like how they close government. Okay, they don't really close government. They leave the core of government open of whatever they want to stay open, and they close and mock and ridicule and pit people against one another, make you feel like the end of the world's coming. They close that kind of government. Well, it's the same thing here. They're backing all the consistent deep state stuff that'll never change, and without that changing, will never change the country. But on the surface, they got wars about things that don't matter. So I'll give you a quick example. Donald Trump, he went and abolished the education department by executive order, supposedly. Well, you can't do that by executive order, so he's done his best to shoot a shot across the bow and say, hey, I'm for this, give me a bill, I'll sign it. But yet they're slow walking that, not happening. Same with the border, not enough, appropriation of guidelines or funds or anything else. Meanwhile, all the deep state stuff is still happening, whether, that's Trump or whether it's the deep state, dragging Trump along, hard to tell, sir.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And the issues that, there's a lot of hoopla and arm waving going on about this, all of the so-called corruption and graft and excessive spending that DOGE is coming up with. But Congress has got to act because everything that he's finding has already been legislatively enacted and created and approved. And so it's still on the books until and unless the Congress says, okay, we're whittling this stuff out. Now, Mike Johnson would say, oh, yeah, that's why we did the continuing resolution, to give us a chance to work on this stuff. But to tell you the truth, like you're pointing out, you just don't see any movement in that's actually going to need to be carried out in order for us to back out of this kind of stuff. And then we got a new war going with the Houthis. And it's just bizarre how quickly that could escalate because Trump said, anybody at the Houthis, they've been shooting at the seaways, in the sea lanes in the Red Sea. And, boy, if a missile goes wrong, we're going to shoot Iran. It's like, what the heck? I mean,
you got to ask yourself, Donald's the front man for this, but you got to ask some questions. How much can a president really do? We're starting to really see that presidents are pretty much, they're eye candy. They're out there for the public. Now, I understand they have a constitutional, traditional role that has plenty of authority, but if you undermine that authority in terms of everything that you're not supposed to do, you do, and everything you're supposed to do, you don't do. At some point, you just become the front man, the media guy, the very rich, successful, bombastic billionaire And at the same time, the deep state just continues to march on. And as far as I can tell, that's what I'm seeing, because nothing that's been done so far in this Congress or in this, quote, current presidency, I don't see anything that can't just be reversed by an auto pen, Doctor.
Well, then that's where we're going with this thing. You're ruled by the executive order, and you die. You live and die by the executive order is what's happening. All of it's unconstitutional. The executive orders that were issued by George Washington don't even resemble in the slightest way the executive orders that the last 10 presidents have put out. Okay, and so the whole thing is a charade. You know, you talk about the president being eye candy. He's not supposed to be eye candy.
Well,
he has
I
a role.
understand, but that's what we've turned the president into in modern democracy, quote, times, right? Not that we have a democracy either. They're
trying to turn him into a monarch, an elected monarch, and we don't have that either. And we've got that AOC, what's his name, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, going around the country and doing their dog and pony show. And it's like, I mean, I don't know if you want to get off on that, but it's holy cow. This is a big resurgence, they're saying, of the Democrat movement, and they're getting their new leadership. Bravo, Sierra, they're touting the same failed, identity politics kind of stuff that the Democrats got blown out of the water with in the last election. And so what they're doing is they're putting a New World Order socialist regime, and Bernie, I think, really is more communist than socialist, but they're socialism and communism, come see, come saw, they're, it's the same thing. I don't know if you've been tracking that or not, but holy cow. I mean, Americans rejected that completely, wholeheartedly, out of hand, and they're going around in the red state areas, and they're trying to say, we're the new guys. It's going to be exciting with us in charge. No, it isn't. It's going to be the Buttigieg side of the party again.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at here. And I'm not here to down President Trump, okay? I realize that he's done a lot of good, and I realize that we're a lot better off with him than, say, we would have been a Kamala or a Bernie Sanders or a Joe Biden if he would have continued, or whatever. I realize we're a lot better off than those things. I get that. And, there's a lot of good being done, even though there's a lot of bad being done. And I don't think that we can honestly blame it on one man. I don't think we can just have the Donald responsible for it all, good or bad, because I don't think that's reality. We've got 3 branches of government. He only represents one branch. We've got Congress, who's supposed to take care of the laws. But what's happened, as far as I can tell, is Congress is derelict in their duty. They've been completely, for the most part, sidelined, except for dog and pony show stuff. And the president then battles it out with the courts. And so the president does whatever he wants by executive order, making law, which he shouldn't do. Then the courts either, one, back him if they think it's okay this time, or slap him down if they don't, based on the political winds that blow. And we've got this fiasco going on. And I blame primarily Congress, because it's the closest branch to we the people. If we're going to control any branch, we can control the House the most, because they're closest to us. Although I can't even get a hold of my congressman hardly, so there you go. And he's new, too. So you would think at first you'd get a hold of him, and 10 years later, once he gets rich, you couldn't. But anyway, we see this over and over. There's only one way to affect the real change, and in my opinion, and that is for the American people to get involved in critical ways, to demand accountability. But also, we need to have the deep state operatives, those who are violating the Constitution, absolutely arrested. Okay? They need to be arrested. They need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and they need appropriate, prosecution for their crimes. And until we get that, I don't see any progress at all. The Democrats are serious. They'll throw you in jail in a heartbeat if you blink wrong. But the Republicans won't do any such thing. The Democrats will do it. The Republicans won't. They just talk. Mike Johnson sits behind President Trump and thumbs up to all the, cost-cutting agenda. And then he says, hey, let's cut costs later. Let's go ahead and pass this big omnibus budget bill, and hey, we'll worry about DOGE's cuts later. And then President Trump, agrees to the same thing. It's a shame. The only one that stood against it was the Kentucky congressman, right? He stood against it. He stood against it, Thomas Massie, and said, hey, I don't want to do this. And then Trump literally targeted him for replacement. Folks, this is reality versus what you've been told in the media. So has Trump done a lot of good? In many ways, yes. But I submit to you that the good that he's done in most situations is temporary at best and is window dressing at best. And let me give you an example to make the point. We've heard forever that J6ers were the ones that were the evil rioters and horrible. We bought that lie, even though the Democrats and the operatives from Black Lives Matter and all these groups, they had rioted all summer, destroyed buildings, took over a city, created a city within a city called Chaz in Seattle, Washington. They did all these things. Go ahead and skip the break, Liz, please. Okay, they did all these things, and no really repercussions for the most part. Then there was a Charlottesville, and the conservatives got the slaughter while the liberals and the extremists and the provocateurs walked away. They tried to do the same thing with January 6th, and they put on TV this false narrative and everything else. The Republicans didn't sue. They didn't stop. They didn't do anything, really, except for just went, oh, this is horrible. Wait till it's our turn. Please elect me, and I'll make it make good. So President Trump releases the J6ers. That's a good start. But it's not even close to enough. It's a defensive measure, to say the least. We need to go on the offensive. And there's an article in the Gateway Pundit today that I find that really relates to this whole discussion and why I'm bringing this whole thing up. Here it is. Huge. The headline says, huge. Barack Obama was using USAID to pretend to send money overseas, but was actually laundering that money to train Rent-a-Riots. Jim Hoft over the gateway.com, gatewaypundit.com. So they pretend to send aid overseas, but we're really laundering the money to train, quote, Rent-a-Riot groups instead. Yeah, Mike Bentz is the guy's name. He went on the Joe Rogan radio program. They say that the Joe Rogan program's got 19 million listeners. I don't know that I buy that either, but I digress. During their conversation, Mike Bentz, not Pence, B with a Bravo, Bentz, Mike Bentz, shares how Barack Obama was using money to USAID to pretend to send it overseas. In actuality, he was training these clowns. Now, this is just a serious problem. He says this was the scandal during the Barack Obama USAID era. They were running a number of operations in Cuba at the time. He said, I'm just showing people where their money gets spent. And my response to Mike Bentz, I appreciate the knowledge, the information, the interview. But you're going to a Joe Rogan, for the most part, pretty much a liberal host. He's never been a conservative constitutionalist. And why are you going to him now? How long has it been since the Obama years, Doctor?
Well, I got, there was interactions I had yesterday morning with somebody that started texting me yesterday morning about this.
But how long since the Barack days, though?
Well, we've had Trump and we've had Biden in the middle in there. So we've gone 8 years.
At least 8 years? And now we're hearing about this on the Joe Rogan podcast? USA pumped $1.2 billion into the system. And then they say we sponsored these, quote, activist groups and these civil society organizations to learn how to control Facebook, Twitter, know what street to focus on, what kind of slogans to use. They were completely trained with this big money. Now, Doctor, you were mentioning somebody texted you yesterday morning?
Oh, yeah. I'll just read you one of my responses to this guy. Here it is. I mean, it's very brief, but it says, once a community organizer, or in other words, a communist revolutionary, always a despicable creature. Free money, too. What a deal. Lenin was a piker compared to the Obama operation, all funded by the stolen funds of American taxpayers. You know, and USAID, every single aspect of it, not one single solitary program under that is constitutional. Because what we're doing is redistributing wealth for, purposes of people that are undermining, as this particular article points out, the Americanist way. But you can't send it overseas and you can't keep it here. Neither one. Even though they were fraudulently saying, oh, yeah, we're sending it overseas to do the mission of USAID. But
if you allow one fraud, how do you complain about the next fraud down the line, Doctor? That's the problem that I'm having with this. So if we accept that you can just steal this money from the taxpayer and distribute it somewhere, why do we have a problem when they lie and distribute it somewhere else? You've committed one theft. What's wrong with a different theft? Okay, that's the problem. But this guy on there talks about how Obama funded a, quote, Twitter clone that would be used to push propaganda in Cuba to inspire these protests and overthrow the government. Okay? He said, so what they did is they took the exact same thing as Twitter, the like buttons, same user interface, retweet buttons, And they created this version that was for Cuba that was like a Spanish word for hummingbird. And they were using these USAID funds that were designated to Pakistan, and contractors were funded by USAID. And then the data would be used to, quote, micro-target anti-government users. In Cuba, their goal was to start out with sports and music and entertainment and fun. Once they built up enough subscribers, they'd begin to introduce political messages through their, quote, social bots and encourage dissent. Once they got critical mass, they would create Rent-a-Riots. They say they're using Cayman Islands bank accounts to get this done. They earmarked it for Pakistani aid, but yet it was never sent there. It was sent to the Cayman Islands to fund this whole operation, he said. Now, either that's the biggest lie we've heard recently, or it's factual. And if it's factual, people's heads need to roll. And I mean figuratively, I don't mean literally here. I'm just saying we need to bring these people in for arrest and prosecution. Barack Obama spied on the Trump campaign, wrongfully using the government to do so. We know that now, after the big Russian scandal broke. The scandal was really a scandal. It wasn't a Trump scandal. It was a scandal on Trump. And, okay, so now they're doing the same thing here at home. We had the January 6th now that got covered up and blamed on people. Now we're getting the pay dirt on that. Doctor, until people start getting arrested, I don't really care what you release next. I don't care how big of a scandal it is, because it's a nothing burger if nothing gets done. Barack Obama will continue to have, protection from the Secret Service for the rest of his life. He'll continue to have plenty of cash for his pensions. And, okay, this is just clown show stuff. And I don't see Donald doing anything about it at all. Pretty soon Donald's like, we're sending a contingent to Greenland. Okay. What about arresting Barack Hussein Obama, who literally triggered this U.S. aid fiasco? $1.2 billion into this one scandal in Cuba. And we're talking about literally in 2010 kind of range. That's like 15 years ago. And at the end of Barack Obama's reign of terror, it's been at least 8 years ago. And now we're hearing about it now. And what it'll be is a nothing burger. There won't be any repercussions, Doctor.
Well, that's the problem, is that this is so ubiquitous. Look it up. It means it's everywhere. There ain't no place it isn't. Okay, this covers everything. And it's been doing it for, 125 years. I mean, think about, and more, when we did stuff like we facilitated a coup in Colombia that broke Panama off. What about what we did to Iran? What about what we did in Ukraine? What about every time we turn around, and you can see why we're hated around the world. We're manipulating society, and it's all being done by the people that are enemies of the Americanist principles this nation was founded on. And yeah, you're right. Whenever there's a big pot of money, somebody's sitting there trying to siphon some off. And the problem is the people in the highest places, they're manipulating the funds for their own benefit. How do people like the Clintons and the Obamas become uber rich, after the years of their presidency? How do our senators do the same thing? How does Bernie Sanders, this socialist that sits in the Senate, how in the heck has he become an uber rich dude? Everybody that touches this pot of gold gets some of it. They're a Midas touch. And that's why they seek office so arduously. It's just beyond me. But that's how everybody's using it. It's just beyond me that why we as Americans get rid of all the unconstitutional stuff, all of it, all across the board. And you're right, it goes back to the House and the Senate, mostly the House, because of their responsibility to originate funding bills. But start the ball rolling and quit this continuing resolution, Bravo Sierra. By the time this continuing resolution expires, they will be a year behind where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to have brought out a real budget last year.
Well, and then what they'll say is, by golly, it's September. Come on, guys, we're about ready to, have Christmas and this and that. Let's just, put together another whatever resolution. They're wasting time and they're slow walking. So even the things that Trump wants to do that are right, they won't back. All the deep state stuff marches on as it always has. Proof? We used to talk about in 2016, lock up Hillary. Now we're not locking up Hillary at all. In fact, we're basically finding out that Barack Obama, this guy literally diverted $1.2 billion. And if we have proof of that, why is he not in prison? And if Donald doesn't take action on this, what is Trump spending his days on? What are the 435 members of the House spending their time on? What are the 100 senators spending their time on? Okay, it's nothing but a clown show. And until we start arresting people, I don't have any confidence at all, Doctor. And I know that sounds negative, and I don't mean to be so belligerent that I'm not grateful for the good. There is some good, but the next headline just adds fuel to the fire. I told you that I'm fearful they're going to make Donald Trump a wartime president. I've mentioned this right from the very start. Okay, I was first on this, people. But here's the next headline. Trump seizes wartime powers. You want to know why, they say? In battle for more fossil fuels. Do we need more wartime powers for fossil fuels, Doctor? You think?
But this is a pretty widely held position.
But it's insane.
It is, but I've personally, face-to-face, discussed this with the guy at the time was a sitting senator, and he says, son, that's our oil over there. He was that. It's like, no.
How is it our oil over there?
Well, that's all that oil.
What about my land in the state of Utah? That's our land. What about that domestic discussion?
Well, and Utah's legislature seizing all of our property rights anyway, beginning with water. That's the big seizure thing in Utah. But that's the problem, is these guys think because they were elected, they have this blank check authority to go out and do whatever they want, but there is no justification for any of this stuff that's going on. And they're out smoozing us all, trying to have us feel like, oh, I'm representing you there. They have these town meetings. I'm listening. But you know what? There really is not a return to the original intent, the baseline principles. And that's the only way we're going to get this back. It's the only way. You can't keep funding, whether you call it USAID or you call it something else. It's still wrong, and you can't do it. But
now, I appreciate DOGE and Elon Musk pointing out that they got these, 14 computers, he says, that are basically money machine computers that create money out of thin air, and then they basically send the money wherever they want. But you put that along with what we just saw Barack Obama do. I agree with all the other points you're making, too. The problem is there's so much, but if we don't start arresting people and stopping it, and if we don't stop spending this money, and if judges fight us on the reduction of the spend, then they need to be impeached and arrested as well and prosecuted, hey, due process, but prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If we don't start doing that stuff sometime, the swamp will absolutely drown Trump. I'm telling you right now. Because you have no way out as long as you let those building blocks of tyranny stay in place, Doctor.
Well, and the problem too is that the priestcraft, I call it a craft, if you will, of attorneyship has basically got the hold on the neck of the American government, and John Roberts is facilitating it with his stuff like, really, yeah, okay, there is an appeals process. I'll give you that. If a district judge screws up, appeal it. But what you have is district judges claiming to be able to run the whole country. Here's a little geographic area of a district judge, and they put a stop to anything that's happening that's a return to the original intent. And so Trump charges, they're saying we ought to have him impeached. Oh, and John Roberts says, oh, no, we can't do that. We're a sacred cow here in America.
Well, now what are we going to do with the wartime powers? Where's that going to go? You think that's going to be less war with that? Let's come back and talk about that. You declare wartime powers. What latitude do you have? And when you declare wartime powers, where does that authority come from? Because it sure ain't in the supreme law of the land as far as I've been able to read. I'm not very smart, so maybe somebody can help me after the pause. Hang tight, Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com, and yours truly on your radio.
Your daily Liberty News Wire. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. Fire crews across at least 3 eastern states have their hands full today amid tinder-dry conditions.
Wildfires force a mandatory evacuation Sunday in a North Carolina county still recovering from Hurricane Helene. 3 wildfires are burning in Polk County. South Carolina's governor declaring an emergency in response to growing wildfires in that state. Voluntary evacuations are in effect. Hundreds of miles north, the New Jersey Forest Service was battling a blaze in the Wharton State Forest. I'm Julie Walker. U.S.
and Russian negotiators back at the table. The BBC's Frank Gardner says they're holding talks in Saudi Arabia on a partial ceasefire in Ukraine.
Russia has so far declined to sign up to the 30-day ceasefire agreed here in Saudi Arabia earlier this month between the U.S. and Ukraine. Now, this latest round of talks has a more limited set of aims: how to safeguard both countries' energy facilities and critical infrastructure, and perhaps come up with a deal over Black Sea shipping. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy to the peace talks, said, "I think you're going to see some real progress in Saudi Arabia." But a Kremlin spokesman said, "We're only at the beginning of this path."
Israel's military says its strike on the largest hospital in southern Gaza targeted a high-ranking Hamas official who was being treated there. That individual was killed, according to Gaza health authorities. A plane load of nearly 200 Venezuelan nationals deported from the U.S. has landed in Caracas. The Trump administration sent the illegal aliens, including some suspected gang members, back to their homeland. The deportations come as the administration continues defending its deportation policies in court. Watching Wall Street, the Dow is up close to 500 points, the Nasdaq 320 points higher. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Financing a home, especially in today's market, is one of the biggest decisions you'll make for your family. Work with a mortgage company that puts you first. I do. Work with a lender founded on biblical principles like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I do. It's Mike Gallagher for the only mortgage company I've used for almost a decade now when financing or refinancing Fellowship Home Loans. I'm friends with the owners, Mike and Brian. I even have them on my show occasionally. I know the care their team puts into every single customer. I can personally tell you that it's a smooth, stress-free process. And that's due to Fellowship's level of service and expertise that puts you in the right loan for your family and your goals. There's a reason Fellowship Home Loans is flooded with 5-star reviews. Whether purchasing a home or a cash-out refi to consolidate some higher interest debt, you can trust Fellowship Home Loans. Start the process. Make the call. 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Mom, you don't know anything about me anymore.
Honey, I know you're good at math. You don't like English. I know Ryan smiled at you yesterday at school. I know your favorite color is purple. And I know you don't like mushrooms. And who can blame you? I mean, mushrooms are a fungus, and people generally try to avoid funguses. Or is it fungi? I'm never quite sure. But, either way, I mean, penicillin is good.
Penicillin is a mold.
Huh. Well, I guess you're right. So you like penicillin, but not mushrooms.
No matter what you talk about, love is what they'll hear.
Mom, if we talk, will you be quiet?
Love to.
A thought from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Visit us at Mormon.org.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, we ought to change the name of this broadcast to The Redneck and the Good Doctor or something like that. I'm just telling you, I don't understand this, people. So maybe the PhD can help me out here. Trump seizes wartime powers. Where the heck do you seize those from? They don't exist, Doctor.
No, these are constantly made up, phony baloney, official sounding justification for destroying everything that this nation was ever founded on. It's really a tragic travesty what we're doing. And honestly, the founding fathers, right from the very beginning, they knew that this idea of wartime powers was actually the means by which the executive would get too big ahead. So this was discussed in the Constitutional Convention, and it just simply does not exist. Here, let me just give you a little quotation. This is James Madison on war powers, okay? And by the way, they were trying to make certain that there was never an overstepping of the bounds. That's why Congress got this. We can discuss at length why Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 was taken rather than allowing the executive to do it, and plenty of discussion about that. But here's what Madison said during the convention. He said, in time of actual war, great discretionary powers are constantly given to the executive magistrate. That's the president, folks. Constant apprehension of war has the same tendency to render the head too large for the body. A standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty. The means of defense against foreign danger have always been the instruments of tyranny at home. Among the Romans, it was a standing maxim to excite a war whenever revolt was apprehended. Throughout all Europe, the armies kept up under the pretense of defending have enslaved the people. And then he held these positions all during his life. Later on in his life, towards the end of his life, he wrote this: of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies, and from these proceed debts, taxes, and armies, and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. In war, too, the discretionary power of the executive is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continued warfare. People, there has never hardly been a moment in my entire life that there has not been a war going on, and we are reaping the whirlwind. We are in those days today now. It's real time in front of our very eyes, and for the president to say, I'm invoking wartime powers, bravo, Sierra. Where do we get these? They're not there in the Constitution, but what happens is, it's like what FDR did during World War II. Oh, we can't change horses in the midstream. He was elected to 4 terms, died in his 4th term, fortunately. But the fact of the matter is, that is the modus operandi of those that wish to seize power. FDR was a great example of deep state in a high office.
I don't even know how to respond to this because, again, there's a lot of things I like from Donald Trump. If we can really jettison the education department, it would be a wonderful thing. If we can really create peace in some of these other areas around the world and back away from war and bring our troops home and chop the military spending from $1 trillion to $500 billion, if we can really get DOGE to dig in and decrease government waste and spending and shut down USAID and, all these things, it would be wonderful. The things that Donald says are right. However, I don't see a genuine effort to accomplish this task by those who surround President Trump, whether it be Congress, in the 3 branches of government with its checks and balances, the courts primarily remade by Donald Trump last go round, or by members of Congress, or by the people that are appointed to office. I just don't see a solid effort on any of these topics. We were told, hey, we're going to go ahead and get rid of daylight savings time. Now it's a nothing burger. It's already passed. We'll never get rid of it with Donald in place because no one showed the mojo. And they came back and did a poll. They looked at which way the wind was blowing, and they're like, nah, too complicated, don't want to do it. All right, so then they missed that. Then they missed the ability to go ahead and fund government a little bit at a time, like I have proposed and like many people have proposed. They funded it with a big old huge omnibus, crazy, whacked out spending bill. Now what are they doing? I mean, we just go right down the line. And if Trump takes these War Powers Acts or Wars Powers, they don't exist, first of all. And a whole congressional body should be challenging Trump on this, saying, wait a minute, you don't have executive wartime powers to seize. And especially when you say it's over, the production of energy or the Green New Deal versus, quote, coal and whatever. I don't know that we need an emergency or the president to declare some special powers or privileges. What we need to do is decrease regulation. What we need to do is get the government out of a lot of these things that they're involved in. Okay, then Trump decides he's going to now, here's his headline, Trump pardons or promises to pardon Hunter Biden's former business partner. Yeah, Devon Archer, theblaze.com has the piece. Now, is Devon a good guy? Well, I don't know. He's hanging out with Hunter Biden in the first place during the Biden drug, years, foreign government. Now, Devon Archer decides that he wants to come clean and he's been kind of speaking out boldly. Of course, it goes nowhere because the deep state will protect Joe and Hunter. And now Joe's protecting Devon. Now, I appreciate Devon getting a little bit of a break because he's telling the truth and blowing the whistle. But if nothing happens to any of these other clowns, why would we give Devon a break? I mean, at what point do you give somebody a break who is guilty as the other parties because they're willing to tell the truth? I mean, I get that maybe a slight lighter sentence or, some advantage, but they're ready to completely pardon Devon? For what purpose? What do we gain? I don't see that this Devon guy's a great guy. When I see he's had some reason to tell the truth, I don't know if he feels like he'll be on the best side of it when it all goes down. But he probably politically felt like, hey, if I go against these guys, then I might get taken care of. I mean, I don't know what drives him, but now we're ready to let this guy off the hook. Pretty soon, no one will be going to jail. We'll be like, we're going to let Fauci off the hook because he, he's an old man. He can't really think straight. Him and Joe, they're, clowns, can't. And we're not going to have any accountability. And I'm telling you right now, the way you know if Washington's doing any good is if they're prosecuting criminals, if they're impeaching judges, if they're taking the deep state down one piece at a time. And the way you do it is you defund them. You've got to defund them. And you've got to impeach them. And you've got to boldly demand that checks and balances exist. The Constitution provides the way, Doctor. But no one's even looking at it.
No, they really, and here's the problem. I mean, there's so many issues you just brought up. Where do I go? I mean, I'm stuttering over here because there's 27 different strings to pull on. But, back in the day of the Obamacare passage, and Nancy Pelosi said, we got to pass it to know what's in it, right? No. You look at something before you're going to buy it. You get a chance to test drive the car. You look at the house that you're going to buy, the land you're thinking about buying.
You read the fine print in the deal, right?
None of the sight unseen Bravo Sierra. But here's the deal. I mean, this pending pardon, what really comes out of this? What's on the table? What benefit will there be if this guy or are we just giving another pass to a criminal? I mean,
now if Hunter and Joe and all these different people go to prison and Devon really single-handedly decided he wanted a moment of truth, I don't mind giving him some kind of a special lighter deal than the other guys. But a full pardon without any actions or results from what he's brought forward, what's the value? What are we getting for that? I don't understand it.
Well, here's the part of the problem, too, is that there was supposedly blanket pardons issued that were issued by auto pens, which in my mind has a lot of questionability about who was controlling that process. I mean, if somebody in the back office was saying, hey, my brother-in-law did something once when he was 10 years old, let's pardon him too. I mean, where does this end? And
Mike Johnson knew about it a year beforehand. He testified on TV. He knew beforehand, a year ahead of time, that Joe didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
And then he kept quiet. He kept silent while Joe was going to run for office, while they skipped the primary, while they did all these things. We didn't even find out about it until after the fact, a year later. I'm finding Mike Johnson culpable in that.
Well, he's got more culpability than you can imagine. I mean, He's one of the guys that's willing to fund the Zionist movement with more nuclear weapons. Not exactly people, okay, but 2,000-pound bombs, they have a nuclear effect on the people that they get dropped on. I mean, these are a for whom it may concern kind of weapon. And we're sending off thousands of those to Israel now, and Mike Johnson's one of those that's encouraging it, along with Donald Trump. And the Houthi thing that's going on, we're talking Gulf of Tonkin stuff all over again. I mean, for those that don't remember what happened back in LBJ's day, we started the Vietnam War over smoke and mirrors. There was no activity that summer night off of the coast of North Vietnam, but they got the Gulf of Tonkin resolution out of that. We've attacked the Houthis, who are closely aligned with Iran, and that's exactly what Israel wants. I mean, holy cow, people, can't you see we're in a religious war and we're being used as the puppets on the string? It's just astounding to me. Holy cow.
It is, but now it gets worse in my mind because, according to Ron Paul, we literally look at this Ron Paul thing, and he just issued an email that I got, and he's talking about the same thing I'm talking about here. He says, Sam, did you hear? Elon Musk. Elon Musk, head of the Department of DOGE, just reported finding what he called magic money computers. Yeah, 14 of them within several federal departments. Then he says these computers allegedly just make money out of thin air. Well, they just issue payments. We've always known the Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air. So this is my point. But now this proves that these departments just had printers in their own possession. No going through the Federal Reserve, just print it yourself kind of thing. The DOGE team has been conducting they call it an aggressive audit, but Congress has to, promote a full audit. Okay. So I look at this thing though, and I go, okay, wait a minute. The Federal Reserve has literally committed crimes for 100 years, printing money out of thin air. It's a crime. Saying there's something for nothing. Print a $100 bill, 2 cents to print it, whatever. Now all of a sudden we're like, hey, it's worth $100 plus interest. I mean, that's flat out fraud. Okay. Now we've allowed that for 100 years. Now we're surprised when government's like, I don't want to go through the Federal Reserve and Congress and ask for money. Can you just install a printer over here for me? And they did, or they do, or they, okay. And either the Federal Reserve needs to prosecute all those departments for fraud on the bank, or the president needs to prosecute Congress, or, these departments. I mean, somebody somewhere is responsible for this. But again, we're too busy going, we're sending a contingent to Greenland. We're going to look at Greenland. Greenland's got a lot of resources that we need. We think we can help the Greenlanders. And I mean, they won't pay a dime in taxes. They'll get rich. Everybody will get rich. Everybody, except for everybody, right? And it's clown show stuff. We're not getting anywhere. We're not making any progress. In fact, DOGE, Elon Musk, and Donald, they're just battling for their very lives before the activist judges. And so now we're going to pretty soon we're going to pardon Hillary because she'll tell on Bill, or Bill because he'll tell on Hillary, or what. It's just a clown show. And I don't see any effort to really rein it in or control it in meaningful ways. And I know someone would be like, Sam, you're sure negative, man. Trump's done a lot of good. I understand all that. But I also understand when you start seizing wartime powers that you don't even have, when you start to basically, go after, talk about Greenland and Canada and this and that and the other, and then you don't do anything when you promise then to pardon Hunter Biden's business partner. Wow. Are you going to pardon Joe too, Donald? And then Elon Musk, head of the Department of DOGE, literally reporting finding what he calls magic money computers. I mean, is anybody going to go to jail for that? Is anybody going to have any accountability? Because if not, see, it isn't going to get better, doctor. It just can't.
Well, this has been such an entrenched violation of everything. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 says Congress has power to coin money. Coining has to do with stamping of precious metals. Go look it up in the original American dictionary. But clear back, I mean, I've got testimony in front of me in my hands right this very minute. And before the Banking and Currency Committee of the House of Representatives in 1935, Mariner Eccles, then chairman of the Federal Reserve, made a statement. There's another one here in 1941, House Committee on Banking and Currency in 1941. I mean, this stuff is absolutely, it's should be before us all. Here's what happened. I'll just give you a little snippet of the 1941 thing. Congressman, Wright Patman, asked Eccles how the Fed got the money to purchase $2 billion worth of government bonds, okay? And Eccles said, we created it. Patman said, out of what? Eccles says, out of the right to issue credit money. Patman then said, and there is nothing behind it, is there, except our government's credit? Eccles said, that's what our money system is. If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money. Sam, this stuff has been endorsed for nearly 100 years now. I mean, that 1935 one, I mean, that's 90 years ago. I mean, come on. This is stuff, and you're saying, oh, they're just discovering. Bravo, Sierra. This has been before the U.S. government from basically the creation of the Fed. It's a criminal operation. You know, the Fed, I know you know this, Sam, and your listeners probably do too. But the Fed is a private banking consortium.
Criminal banking cartel.
It is. And they do this, and now we've got, well, should we have expected something?
So we're supposed to be mad when they just basically put the printers in the departments as opposed to the Federal, because see, the Federal Reserve can go home and they don't have to work. They can just hang out and let the government print their own money, see? There's no way this could have been printed without the Federal Reserve knowing, so the Federal Reserve must have been hiding this fraud from the American people as well. But again, nobody will point the finger. Nobody will really do anything. They'll just all riot and go, this is horrible, how evil, and it'll just be a political discussion. So I appreciate Ron Paul sending me this, but I've already known it from the DOGE reports. But at the end of the day, then at the end, Ron Paul's just like, hey, we got to raise money. Please send us money to fight this. Please send us money to the Fed and the Fed. And we got to, and now it's just a big old money thing again. And I don't see any real progress. I believe Ron Paul's genuine in his efforts, but I don't believe we're getting anything done at all. Okay, they're just fleecing the people with very limited amount of money we have. They're just making us give more away on these false pretended ideas that we're going to solve these problems. Now, check this out to make the point. Donald Trump just agreed to waive all taxes for people making less than $150,000 a year. But there's a catch, says Jack Davis over at westernjournal.com. There's a catch. What's this guy's name? Lutnick. He's the, secretary over there or whatever else. He says this: if we can balance the budget, will you agree to waive all income taxes for every person who makes less than $150? Donald Trump says yes. So you can feel good now. Hey, they're working on this, and if they can go ahead and balance the budget, then you won't pay any taxes unless you make over $150,000. Here's my problem with all that. All that does is pit one American against another. All that does is play games and have most of the American people not pay any taxes. All this does is play, and that's if you can even balance the budget in the first place. And what I mean is, it's a long shot at. I thought we were talking about cranking up the tariffs system and shutting down the internal IRS system. Now we're like, oh, well, we'll give people under $150,000 a break. They're throwing out 25 things. None of them will come to fruition. Maybe one or two out of the 25 will help improve things slightly that they can take credit for the whole operation for. It's kind of like building the wall. Hey, we built 5 miles of the wall and keep taking pictures of that and tell everybody we built more of the wall. And it's basically this big old propaganda machine. And that's what I'm seeing here. They're not even about to abolish the IRS, Doctor. They've made talks, statements, and now they're like, well, we'll give everybody under $150,000 a year. We'll go ahead and they won't pay any taxes. That's if we balance the budget, though. Well, I don't have any control over balancing the budget. So what difference does it make to me? At the end of the day, we just got to see what you do, not what you say, right?
Well, first of all, it's a pipe dream, and the Congress is going to have to take action. They created the IRS. They're going to have to resolve this thing. They're going to have to take back control of it. The idea that anybody under $150,000, I mean, how long will it be before $150,000 is the minimum wage? I mean, see, they keep making a moving target, but here's the deal. We have this second point of the Communist Manifesto is a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Okay, so let's say we eliminate all taxes for anybody 150,000 or below. That I'm okay with that. I'm good with that number, right? Okay, we're all good. But the fact is that somebody over 150,000 is going to get a progressive income tax beyond that point. It's all part of the Communist Manifesto. A progressive or graduated income tax is point 2 of the Communist Manifesto. And so, but like I say, In days gone by, anybody that made, this was 100 years ago plus, anybody that made less than a couple of $1,000s a year was exempt from taxes. Well, now that's equivalent of $400,000+ a year, because what we've done with our inflationary stuff with the Federal Reserve and creation of money and everything like that. So at different times in our history, we have had a get out of jail free letter that said basically we're eliminating taxes or we're not going to impose taxes on people that make less than this amount. Whether it was $2,000 back in the day when $2,000 would buy what $450,000 would buy today, or whether it's $150,000 today, that will continue to encroach on the purchasing power of the dollar with our money creation factors. And someday, maybe, who knows, $150,000 will be the minimum wage. So all of us have got a heavy progressive income tax on us because we're making more than $150,000. You see, it's all smoke and mirrors. This concept, it just, to most every American, they're saying, well, I make less than $150,000. I'd be good with that.
Well, and then the next Democrat president comes along and says it's hard times, people. Government's starving. We can't meet our bills. We're going to drop the $150K down to $100,000 a year by executive order. Now what are you going to do?
Well, they create enough money that $150K is what you need to live if you're going to buy a McDonald's hamburgers every day. I mean, see, you
those
can
are getting
see the
expensive,
multiple
by
ways.
the way.
John Maynard Keynes, by the way, talked about that nobody, not one in a million, understands the concept of inflation. It's a hidden tax, if you will, on everybody. See, right now, I look at the kids nowadays. They're coming out of high school that won't work for less than $20 an hour.
Why should they, doctor?
Well, when I was a kid, it was $100. It was $1.50 an hour. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, now it's $20 an hour.
But why should they work for less? They can get it. All they got to do is riot and lobby and lay around and get a free check, or work for $20 an hour. Which do you want them to do?
But the inflation factor's got to be considered.
For sure.
$1.50 an hour was what I was making, and now they make $20, and they're no better off than I was at the time. And the whole thing applies.
In fact, they're probably less better off.
And this applies to universities, for example. The government, the cost of university, I thought it was pretty bad back in the 60s when I first started going to school in university. And I compare what I was spending then to what kids spend now. Excuse me, but for what? When government got involved and started giving free money in Pell Grants and in grants to universities, and then they made loans available, the universities just jacked their prices, and they take the extra money out of the pockets of the kids that are going there because they can. And university prices are astronomical.
The government will ensure they can, right?
But yeah, that's the thing, and we continue to foster it. We got this Department of Education thing and their Pell Grants and the idea of someday forgiving student loans. It's all smoke and mirrors, and this has all been manipulated and created outside any constitutional authority. But, you talk to a kid, I'm not going to give you Pell Grants anymore. Holy cow, you're going to make me starve to death. You're one of the worst people in the world. No. There's no right for you to take taxpayers' money and just go to school on it. I know people personally that took their Pell Grants and bought expensive vacations, not motorhomes, they were travel trailers. They rented expensive apartments in San Francisco while they were going to college, and it's like, holy cow. All of this is done because of government manipulation.
I got a good news piece at the end of the hour. Salem Media, ladies and gentlemen. Charlie Kirk tapped to take over Dennis Prager affiliates. Dennis fell and isn't doing so well. So as he's coming back, Charlie Kirk takes the spot. Now, I appreciate that. Hopefully Charlie Kirk can bring some truth to power on this thing. But again, I'm not so sure that it's not all smoke and mirrors, folks. That's what we're seeing everywhere. And I don't mean to down anybody doing good, folks. And I know we need to be positive. I get it. I have confidence in the supreme law of the land, and I have confidence in we the people. If we're given the straight information, okay, we can make a difference. We need to turn to God, family, and country. Apply the Constitution liberally if we want this to succeed. We got to work together, folks. God save us all.